Al, can you see do you see me in that thing?
I'm not seeing him.
He's in the middle. I can see.
Oh, there he is. You see where you are? Okay.
I can.
Yeah, the little black thing is covering you there. And she sees you, like if I go over here, I see you. Yeah.
This, oh, okay, yeah,
That's
yeah.
why I couldn't see
Yeah,
you.
yeah, but I'm in there.
But you're in there.
I'm on there.
Definitely there. Thank goodness.
I wonder if I even have it right. Do I look normal, ma'am? Do I look normal in there?
I mean, that's a loaded question.
Relatively speaking.
All
Not,
things considered, you're cutting your head off just a little bit.
cut my head off just a little bit?
Very,
Okay.
very top of your head.
All right,
You
all
looked
right.
really good on TV last night.
We'll move over here a little bit. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Switching back.
You know what? Screw this. I'm gonna do this so I can see it. There we go.
Just gonna monitor yourself.
All right, guys, here we go. We'll get the show on the road. I'm going to pass around the sign-in sheet. If you've been here before, you know the drill. We're really just looking for your name, email, phone number, so that we can start an intense surveillance program on you. No, it's we send out newsletters. We'll follow up with phone calls. Also, if you're interested in a recovery coach, now what I want to talk about with recovery coaching really quickly is we're having a bit of a manpower issue at Favor. So you know, at Favor Greenville, we put the non back in nonprofit, and so our staff part-time, a lot of volunteers. We're trying to get more people involved, and we're going to resolve this issue, and we're going to scale this thing up and get the folks on board that we need to get on board. But we're in a bit of a transition period right now. So if there's a delay on a family recovery coach, that's the only thing going on with that. We want you to keep coming here. The other thing that we've talked about, maybe we'll do more groups. Maybe we'll do different types of groups. Small groups, I know I get a lot of questions personally. I'll get a phone call and someone will kind of say, Rich, can you give me a call, and or can we meet? And that's just a time issue. I personally, I didn't even know that it was 6:30, to be honest with you. I ate like a powdered donut today, or 10, and just sort of like kept moving and doing. So time is becoming an issue, but we want to respond. I want you to know how important it is for us to respond to what you have going on. And we're very open to feedback. And if your name gets on a list and you don't get a recovery coach, personally contact me. My cards are out in the front desk. I'll get them for you when we're done. And email me and say, what up, Rich? Where's my coach? And we will try to. You can wait a week. You should wait about a week, okay?
Sorry, I just want to get that
Yeah. And then email me again. Whatever we need to do, let's work together on this. Let's work together on this. We want to get you the support that you need. I'm also, like I said, open to doing other types of groups. If it was important to have a small group meeting where we talk about very specific issues. For example, if you wanted to kind of have a special workshop on a Saturday and talk about co-occurring disorders or depression, or how do I put together an intervention team, I would be very, very open to doing that. I just need suggestions from you guys. All right, so I'm going to start this over here. Watch out for all my cords. Everybody watched the Chronicle last night?
Yeah.
By show of hands, how many people watched it? All right, good deal. Good deal. What's that?
I have it on my DVR.
Yeah. I thought it was well done. I thought the Chronicle was really well done. I thought that they did a good job covering a lot of different programs. I thought they did a good job covering a lot of different viewpoints. I thought it was really interesting, for example, when they had the person on there talking about dealing with being in pain. I thought that's a fair side of the conversation. That's a part of the conversation that needs to be emphasized. And they really kind of came at it from every possible angle. They really did. I think the key thing, or the problem that we have, I think the Chronicle points that out unintentionally, is we have all these great programs, but how do we connect them, and how do we get people to actually show up for them? The one thing that we didn't answer in that special last night was, how do we deal with the reality that 90% of people with this issue just refuse to do what they're supposed to do? And how do we connect to those folks and drag them along in the process? And I think until we figure out exactly how to do that, and we hope we're trying to bring some solutions to that process, it's going to get really hard, because you're going to get into this endless cycle of only 10% of the folks getting help, which means we have this new, I hate to say it this way, but this new crop of addicts just year over year over year, and it's going to get really hard to catch up to this thing unless we find a way to engage people who don't want to be engaged. And we really didn't talk about that on that show last night. That's my only, I don't even call it criticism, that's my only observation. So this, just a real quick background for me. I have a master's degree in sociology. I have an MBA with a concentration in healthcare management. Those of you who've been coming for a while, you get tired of me saying this, but I think it's important, especially if you're new, to know exactly who's talking to you tonight. Licensed clinical addiction specialist, certified clinical supervisor. This is an EAP certification to work with corporations. This is a certified ARISE interventionist. This is SAP to help people if they have Department of Transportation issues. This is if you get DUIs. And an EMDR therapist, that's trauma-specific work. But in addition to that, I'm a person in long-term recovery. For me, it's been 16 years. I was addicted to pain pills. I was addicted to alcohol way before pain pills, but then pain pills came along and destroyed my life and took me out and did what alcohol couldn't do. I had used alcohol for 15 years, 16 years, and pain pills got done in 2 years what alcohol couldn't get done in 15. Brought me to my knees. And so I guess you could say I was at the beginning of the opioid epidemic. I was before there were prescription monitoring programs, and in a good way, before there was heroin and stuff like that. Heroin was around, but it was very much on the fringe. So this program, Favor, takes a little bit of a different angle on this stuff. This is how I wrote it up. Who am I? Why listen to me? I was just trying to get you to listen to me by saying all that stuff. This is not a therapy group. That's a very important thing to say for all kinds of different reasons. This isn't meant to replace therapy. If it's not broke, don't fix it. If you're doing something in your life that's helping, if you're seeing a therapist, if you're seeing a psychiatrist, if you're going to some type of support group that works, keep doing it, right? But if it is broke, fix it. This is an important thing that goes on in the helping professions, in the helping world. I'm going to talk a lot about this tonight. If you're seeing a therapist and it's not working, or you're going to a support group and it's not working, try something new. That's what we would say. Don't quit the process, try something new. So tonight, you're here to check it out, but don't scrap anything else you're doing unless this is a new program that you would want to start. And I'm also kind of encouraging you not to throw away what other people have told you. I'm very, very opinionated. Very opinionated. I'm going to tell you my take on it tonight, but probably a lot of people disagree with me. So you sort of have to kind of, it's a judgment call to a certain degree. And but I really want to encourage you, if you're doing a program and it's working, I want to encourage you to continue to do that. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. So this group, meant to be a little bit different, kind of a lecture, but I also want to talk about what you guys want to talk about. Before I get into a specific subject, I just wanted to talk about a couple principles that sort of guide us. A lot of you have heard this before as well. Family recovery stands on its own merit. We believe that you guys kind of working on your stress, your anxiety, working on ways to handle the situation, working on ways to help your loved one, that stands on its own merit whether or not your loved one is in active addiction, active recovery, long-term recovery, whatever it may be. So family recovery is an important thing to pursue in and of its own right. And everything is individualized. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for anything that y'all are dealing with. Everybody's circumstance, of course that's the case. Everybody's recovery is going to take on a different tone. Of course that's the case. We are all individual people with what? Our own individual backgrounds, our own family backgrounds, our own worldview. How could what works for Rich be the exact same thing that we should do for Joe? And that also applies for family members. Family involvement helps, it does not hinder. I heard the greatest thing today, the absolute best news. I was at Greenville Healthcare System. By the way, shout out to Greenville Healthcare System. They are cutting edge. They are working with favor. They are pushing the envelope in terms of our collaboration. I was over there again today. There are some laws coming out in the medical world that may allow HIPAA to be ignored in order to communicate with family members if it's an emergency related to addiction. And I say about time, right?
Yes.
I mean, that deal that I can be in active addiction. I'm in active addiction. I am not thinking clearly, right? By definition, when I'm in active addiction, I'm not able to think things through. And I'm going to go to a doctor's office and somehow, some way squeeze my parents out of the process. And say, I'm not going to sign HIPAA. My parents shouldn't be involved. That's not cool. That's not cool. Family members have to be intimately involved in this process, not marginalized. And that law has not gone through, guys. That's something that's being actively talked about. But I think it's an absolutely essential idea. Detachment is the last resort, not the first resort. This is a little different in favor. If you were to walk into a lot of places, the very first thing that they would do is tell you, you got to step back from the situation. It's not your problem, it's the person's problem. We know that it gets to that point. It does get to the point where you have to step away, but we would make an argument that detachment probably comes at the end of a long line of other things. And that detachment is actually something you're going to do down the road, not your first support group meeting. I don't think, you don't have to feel compelled to leave here tonight and kick anybody out. You don't have to feel compelled to leave here tonight and not talk to anybody anymore. I have no idea where I saw this, but it was one of the most disturbing things that I've seen in quite a while. And I couldn't even tell you where it was, but I know it came from somebody who promoted themselves as a professional. And they said, don't even give your loved one a bologna sandwich. That's exactly what he was saying. Do they have bologna sandwiches in South Carolina? Okay, because it made sense in Pittsburgh. So don't even give your loved one a bologna sandwich. Don't give them a bologna sandwich. Now that's baloney. Okay, that is probably one of the most disturbing things that I've heard. Now I could see that if that was said by somebody who was just trying to do their best, and maybe they were somebody at a meeting or whatever. But this person was promoting himself as a professional who ran a recovery place, and that's not appropriate and that's not necessary. That's not how this works. It's not the addict versus the family. Does this make sense? It's not how it is. In a weird way, we've sort of set it up that way over time, and we kind of have it's unrolled that way with terms like tough love and stuff. But I want to emphasize we don't believe that. Do we believe that the family has to make changes in their behavior? Absolutely. Do they have to start to do things different? Do they want to talk about boundaries? Do they want to talk about how they respond to situations? Certainly. But it doesn't have to be punishing, and it doesn't have to be quote-unquote tough, that kind of thing. And I'm going to talk about that a lot tonight, because that's very disturbing to me, that there are people out there who say that they're a professional and are telling people that. Telling people, don't even make them a bologna sandwich. Don't even meet them for lunch. I'm here to tell you, it's okay to meet your loved one for lunch. It's perfectly fine if your loved one is struggling to meet them for lunch or meet them for a cup of coffee. That's not going to make or break their recovery. That's not going to make or break your recovery. It's simply lunch. And it's somebody that you love. Why in the world would you not meet them? Now, if when you meet them, they treat you horrible, if when you meet them for lunch, they spend the whole time banging on you, telling you how to, give me money, give me money, give me money, that's a different story, right? You're setting boundaries then because of the way the person treats you, not just for the sake of, I don't want to talk to you anymore. The reason that stuff exists, guys, the reason some of those ideas exist is because, believe it or not, for decades, and you can make an argument that the United States of America still thinks this, we thought we could punish a person into recovery. We actually thought that we could, if we made the consequences severe enough, we could punish them into recovery. Now, that has been proven to be ineffective, right? How many people, do you personally know who've gone to jail multiple times? How many people do you know that have lost jobs, who've lost their children, who've lost, everything, but continue to use? So I'm going to challenge that type of thinking. And then the other thing is, the family is 8 times more influential than the professional. This study was done by the Arise Intervention Group. In terms of impact and leverage, the family has 8 times more influence than the professional. At Favor, I get to see people for a long time, and I have some people that I've worked with for 3 years. That's an exception to the rule. Most therapists or counselors or coaches don't necessarily get to work with somebody that long. But even in the best case scenario, I'm not going to know anybody as long as you're going to know them. Does this make sense? Even if I know the person for 5 years, you're going to know them for 40. So what about empowering the family to learn how to use that relationship to the benefit of change rather than relying on us? And that's what I want to try to get out of this group. That's the idea behind this. So any questions or comments on the principles? All right. A couple other things, myths that we want to challenge. And I sort of talked about some of these. We want to challenge the idea that the therapist or the treatment center is the all-knowing expert. And you guys may or may not have experienced, but this idea that you call up that 1-800 number and the person on the other end of the line, starts telling you how you have to get your loved one in treatment today or they're going to die. And they start to speak to you with a certain level of authority, or when they go to treatment, they speak to you like as if they have this thing figured out, and they don't seem to value your opinion. If you have those type of experiences, you want to walk away from those situations if possible. That's not how this is. This is a collaborative venture. You guys know your loved one better than we do. You know what makes them tick. Now we're going to give you advice and we're going to give you feedback when we think when we see it differently. We're going to probably see things differently, right? I mean, that's just, I'm not in the middle of your situation. I can look at it from the outside objectively. But we don't want to think of it as Rich is the expert and you guys are just here for me to tell you what to do. We want to think of, let's figure this out together. People will ask me questions and I really won't give them direct answers. I bet you it's incredibly frustrating to talk to me in some cases. I don't like to directly tell people, here's what you're going to do. Now I have in situations where people have literally said, I want you to tell me what to do. But that's not my default setting. My default setting is to try to help you figure out what to do rather than me tell you what to do. For all kinds of different reasons. The most significant reason being you know the situation much better than I do. A couple other things that we challenge: tough love versus appropriate expression of love. It's just love, period. It's not tough love. You can take the tough out. You might need to set boundaries. You might need to do things different. I've said it here before. I've kind of used the analogy. If I love my children, that means I have to set boundaries sometimes. My 4-year-old wants to drive my car. Right? I love him, so it's appropriate for me to say, no, you can't drive the car. My 8-year-old wants to play video games longer than anybody in the history of mankind. It's his stated goal. It's the reason he was put on this earth. And it's a boundary, if I love him, is to set a boundary around those video games. By the way, man, what in the hell happened to video games? When did they become so weird? You know, back in the day when it was just Pong, man. You know that game, Linda? I also challenge the idea of enabling. Again, I think enabling comes with a lot of negativity attached to it. It can make you feel guilty. It can make you feel bad about yourself. I don't see it as enabling. I think sometimes we get out of control with the way we handle ourselves. Sometimes we overdo it. Sometimes we use bad judgment. We might have behaviors we have to change. We might have to do things different and respond to things different. But you guys are going through a lot of stressful situations right now. This is very hard. Addiction is hard enough to deal with on its own. I would caution you to avoid some of these terms that make you feel worse about yourself. I have had people come in and sit down with me in my office, and they literally say, "Rich, I'm the poster child for enabling." And when they say it, they have this demeanor about them that kind of is saying, like, you know, and I suck. It's kind of like that's the end of the sentence. Rich, I'm the poster child for enabling, and I suck as a parent. That's kind of like what you can read into that. I don't want you to think of it that way, guys. That's not what's going on. If you've overdone it, if you've made bad decisions trying to help your child, and I do want to talk about the difference between spouse and parent. I do think there's a difference. That has been said to me. My wife has pointed that out to me. You know, it might be different spouse to spouse than it is parent to kid, but parent to kid, it's very hard for me to look at that and say that you didn't do what naturally comes to you when you tried to save your kid. That you didn't do what like almost is kind of wired into you to do. If you tried to save your kid and you overdid it, you probably are doing what's hardwired in you. That might be different when it comes to spouses. I get that. And but parent to child. By the way, I will tell you that on the Recovery Cartel, which is a podcast that we started, I'm interviewing my wife on that, and it will be out probably by the end of the week. And when I interviewed her, I actually learned some things. And so I didn't know that I was quite that, what's the word, difficult to live with. She certainly pointed that out, though. We also want to challenge the idea of hitting rock bottom. And the reason we want to challenge the idea of hitting rock bottom, the main reason is it's just too dangerous right now. It's just, we're in the middle of a situation where sitting back and waiting and letting things unfold, that's probably ill-advised right now. So we want to try to get to things a little earlier, and we'll talk more about that as we go through. And finally, we want to encourage you guys to think and understand that if your loved one's doing recovery, whatever that recovery is, we support it. Don't get caught up in a certain type of recovery I was told whenever he was in rehab that he had to do 90 meetings in 90 days, and he's not doing 90 meetings. If he's getting better, that's all that matters. If the person is getting better, that's all that matters. There is no one way to do recovery. That's been studied, that's been researched, that's a fact of life. All right, so that's just sort of the principles and some of the things that we kind of throw out there. Any questions or thoughts or comments about any of the principles or these myths that we're talking about challenging? Yes, sir.
The enabling one. I mean, I know who you're kind of objecting, the group that you would be objecting to in terms of that. But if you don't let them feel the consequence, you constantly economically bail them out of their problems, you are enabling them, and they're not going to seek help most likely.
I actually don't think that you're enabling them. I think that enabling would be literally sitting down and saying and consciously saying to yourself, what can I do to promote my loved ones using? Okay? I think what you're doing is you're unconsciously trying to save them, and you're probably trying to escape a lot of anxiety yourself. But I think enabling implies that there's sort of like a conscious choice being made that I want to see my kid go down in flames. Either way, we would not disagree with the idea that the behavior itself should change. We might disagree with how it's labeled. Okay? So you could say, well, that's semantics. Semantics are important. And again, you're talking about one person's opinion. you're talking about one program's opinion, I guess. But you guys get the point. Regardless of what you call it, whether you call it enabling, whether you call it maladaptive behaviors, whether you call it codependency, whatever label that you put on this behavior, can we all agree that there might be things that have to change? And that's the most important part of the conversation. I'm encouraging you guys to take a strength-based approach to this and try to look at the situation through a lens that gives yourself a break. You don't need to be punished anymore for this either. If it doesn't feel that way, and if you're in a situation where it's not broke, don't fix it. Again, I want to emphasize that. If it's not broke, don't fix it. If you're in a situation where the framework of enabling works, then continue within that framework. Does that make sense to everyone? Because it's really important for me to put forth and make sure I'm clear on this. If you have a way of thinking of this disease and you have a way of dealing with this issue that's working for you, don't change anything. What's important to me is you walk out of here tonight feeling like you have a little bit more of a grasp on what's going on and a little bit more serenity and peace around your situation. I quite frankly don't care what you call it. Any questions about that? All right, and then the other thing that I want to say, and I think this could be a helpful thing, it could be a hurtful thing, it's just an observation. I also don't think we know as much about addiction as we think we know. I think there's a lot to be learned, and I'm going to talk about what I know about it tonight, but I certainly am not the expert on addiction. I am not the neurobiological expert on addiction, and quite frankly, I don't think society knows even 50% of the reality of addiction. I think addiction is incredibly individualized and incredibly complex. And it has all kinds of different issues associated with it and all kinds of different dynamics that come into play. So what we talk about tonight, that may just be the tip of the iceberg. Learning and researching this and learning more about it and learning more about new approaches and new ways to help your loved one or help yourself, that's a never-ending process. Any thoughts or comments on that? Yes?
My son, Keith, is in recovery. He's been clean and sober about 9 months now. He writes music and sings and plays. And he writes about his past and all the things that has happened in his life. I'm learning so much about just listening to those words on what he's been through. And some of those songs are so intense that it just...
It's almost a therapeutic way of dealing with things for him.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's teaching me where he's come from, what he's...
Yeah.
The path that he's taken.
Well, in order to recover, literally, the definition of recovery is, I had a problem, I enter into some type of change, and I no longer have that problem. In other words, I'm not using drugs, I'm not using alcohol, I'm not destroying my life, and my life is getting better. The idea that recovery equals some type of certain program is so inappropriate and so illogical and such a problematic concept for me to tap into. If a person is getting better and getting therapeutic value out of something that he invented, out of a process that he invented, it's almost like he's in a journaling process, then I would champion that.
Awesome.
I would champion that. I think that's nothing but a wonderful thing. If a person is getting it through attending favor meetings, that's a wonderful thing. If a person is getting it through attending 12-step meetings, that's a wonderful thing. I know people who go see a therapist once a week, and that's been working for them. Problem, remission, recovery. That's what we're looking for. And I also think that this may be a hopeful part of this process because there may be solutions in the future that we don't even know about right now. If we actually started to put some money into research, we might see some solutions. What we know right now is that it's a brain issue. So the term brain disease gets all controversial. People put out YouTube videos about it. Everybody argues on Facebook. It's not a disease. We can agree on this. It's something happening in the brain. Can we agree with that? Whether you want to call it a disease or a disorder, I choose the word disease. Something happens in the brain. What you have, and the neurotransmitter involved is dopamine. And on these slides, what you got going on is You got on the left a healthy brain. This indicates just the level of dopamine in a healthy brain. So where it's red, that's the most intense level of dopamine. And you see for each substance, cocaine, methamphetamine, alcohol, and heroin, that over time, the dopamine transmitters go away. Actually, the receptors go away. Do you guys see this? So this is what I would deem as medical proof that something's changing in the brain. This is the idea behind these slides. This is relatively new information, relatively new technology. This wasn't always available. There was great debate, great argument around what was happening. But this hopefully can start to put this to rest. This activity is what allows you to experience normal, everyday experiences as pleasurable. Not pleasurable in the euphoric sense, pleasurable in life's okay sense. So we come to this meeting tonight. All of us are in a decent place. Our dopamine neurotransmitters are working. Everything's fine. We leave here, we feel a little bit better about things. If you don't have the capacity to produce dopamine, if your brain's not processing dopamine, you don't have the ability to feel pleasure. And if you got there because you were abusing drugs and alcohol, your default setting is going to go find more drugs and alcohol. That's why it goes from just having some fun, good little time, to the desperate using. Drinking every day, using every day. I'm not going to do this today. I said it all the time. I'm not going to do this today. Go to bed. I'm not going to do that tomorrow. And when I got up, there would be this overwhelming compulsion that would come over me, which might be a little bit hard to understand unless you've ever gone through a craving or an experience where you got to get a hold of something. This overwhelming feeling kind of comes over me. And then by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm seeking this stuff. I'm trying to see what I can get a hold of. And then I do it again. I do it all day, right? Same cycle goes on, and I'm feeling guilt and I'm feeling remorse. And then I go to bed that night, and I'm not going to do it again tomorrow. I'm not going to do it. Confrontation with my wife. I'm on the verge of losing my family, that kind of thing. I'm not going to do it tomorrow. Then I get up and I start my day and I start going through the day, and I can't feel it. I'm not feeling it, right? There's something going on in my brain. So by 2 o'clock, I'm seeking it again. Are you following me? Now, mix in on top of this other certain substances that involve physical withdrawal. So if you talk about opioids, for example, you can become physically addicted to opioids without any of this other stuff going on. So now add on top of it that you're physically addicted when you wake up in the morning. Now you can really see why somebody who has a heroin problem would go through that cycle, and it would be even more intense. They would be saying, I'm not going to do it. They would wake up, and the first thing when they woke up, they would go chase it. So any questions about this slide or about this process? Or comments even?
Does the brain recover when it gets?
Yes, I have a slide that talks about the brain recovering, yes.
Well, that was kind of my question, is how long, like, when you are away from it, is there a period of time if they don't have anything at all that they can, like, fully be completely normal?
You do make a comeback. You do make a comeback. There's a hypothesis called the dopamine deficiency hypothesis. Emphasize the word hypothesis, that some people are born with less dopamine and they may never get back to the full level because they didn't have it to begin with. I don't believe that to be the case. I think you come back online. I think that you get back to where you need to be. And recovery, for me, is not this experience. Like, I don't feel that. I know that I'm back. I know that I can experience a normal day. How long did it take? It takes longer than a week. I think it's very different for different people, and it's very different for different substances. It depends on the length of time. I think for me, probably about 90 days, I was pretty re-engaged, that kind of thing. I've heard people talk about year. I've heard people talk about dealing with this post-acute withdrawal kind of phenomenon for a year, where they just weren't feeling it. They felt like they couldn't sleep right. They felt it was even maybe a little worse than experiencing pleasure. Do you see how difficult that may make the recovery process? This is why support groups can be so important to a person in recovery. This is why getting in a support group and having somebody around you that says you're going to be okay when you're going through that. Because it's really weird. I don't know if anybody in here has experienced it. It's not even depression. It's different than depression. Depression will keep you in bed, right? Depression will make you have suicidal thoughts. Depression will keep you from eating. Those are some of the symptoms of depression. It's not like depression. It's like Yeah, you just can't. You don't feel anything. Yes.
I was gonna say, I know with mine, it was, I would be tired, but I couldn't sleep. And I would
Yeah.
try, like, I couldn't get back into a pattern of normal. I would go to sleep for like an hour and then be up for 5 hours.
Yeah.
And I was feeling better, but it was just sort of like, my
Yeah.
body was, if
Yes.
it was a happy time, I trying to be happy, but like I couldn't.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. If it's a happy time, because that's actually a really good observation. Because I know I went through this too. You would be in situations where you should be having fun. You would be in situations where this should be a good time. We're at the family reunion. We're out fishing. We're at the Steeler game, and they're beating the Browns 58-0. It's only halftime, and so all that kind of stuff is going on, but you just can't feel it. You're just not feeling it. It's a great. I should be happy that everything's fine, but I'm just not feeling it, which is different than depression. Somebody else Darlene, were you going to say something, or had you already asked?
No, that's
Okay.
what I asked.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Is there an actual way to measure how much dopamine a person
That's a
has,
great
or
question.
Which end of the spectrum are you on? Because maybe we started low to begin with.
There's not that I'm aware of. I have never. I think that would be a fascinating thing to know. I would go get tested tomorrow if there was a way to find out. But I've never known. This is not technically a chemical. What's interesting about brain process, it's actually like electric. It's an electric interaction between cells. It's a neurotransmitter. So I don't know how. You could probably do like a before and after imaging of people. I've been approached, and I think this is interesting. I've been approached about a program that can do cognitive testing. It's a little bit different, and they're coming back in to see me, but what they're telling me is that they can show over time the improvement based on these scores in these certain tests. They'd have to explain that to me. I don't really understand how that works, but there's something. I think that would be interesting if you could actually see yourself improve over time. You know how when you're trying to lose weight, you can get on the scale and you can see I'm doing good. With recovery, you can't see that. It's a day-to-day experience, and it's not like on Wednesday you're all screwed up and you're not feeling right, and on Thursday you're feeling good. I think having markers along the way might be very, very helpful. What other comments or questions about the deficiency and what goes down? Any other thoughts or questions? Now, this is interesting. So this doesn't happen with every single drug. It tends to happen with methamphetamines. It tends to happen with amphetamines, from what I've been told, and I'm learning more about this, but serotonin can also be impacted. What you have going on here is you have a healthy brain and the production of serotonin, and then you have methamphetamine abuser over time. Serotonin will go away. Methamphetamine, MDMA, some other of the central nervous system stimulants, you can lose the production of serotonin, and serotonin has been theorized and connected to what? Depression, right? So there's a chance with certain drugs that it could get even more complex and more complicated, because you may not only be experiencing an issue with the dopamine, you may also be experiencing an issue with serotonin. Now, a lot of times this winds up getting addressed. A lot of folks, I'm going to talk about co-occurring disorders, but a lot of folks are placed on medication to address depression anyway. But I think it's interesting that a drug like methamphetamine that gets you so high, right? I mean, has anybody ever known anybody on methamphetamine? You're not depressed, are you? I mean, that's not depression. That's like, let's take a VCR apart. Let's go. Anyone know what a VCR is? Okay, all right, man. Now we know that you know what bologna sandwiches are and VCR. So methamphetamine ramps you up, super intense, and then you suffer these long-term effects, and the recovery process becomes more complex, especially if you had any other kind of issue with depression going on. This is some. It may not be new information, but this is new information that I've become aware of. So it also can affect you on that level. And the good news, and you can see and this is in the case of cocaine, the brain activity comes back slowly but surely, right? This is normal, okay? This is it coming back after 10 days, and this is after 100 days. So someone was saying, how long does it take? in the case of cocaine, it would appear it takes longer than 100 days. So how do you keep the person in the game becomes the challenge for us. This is why if your loved one, tries recovery. So people will say to me, and again, I'm just going to be real straightforward with you guys. Like I err on the side of the addict. I err on the side of the family member. I err on the side of the participant. When in doubt, I give a person the benefit of the doubt. That's just, and you could say, Rich, you're naive and you're going to be easily manipulated, whatever. If I have one or two ways of looking at the situation, I'm going to look at the situation in a more positive light for the person. And so people will say to me frequently, they did treatment or they're doing recovery, but they really don't want it. They're just going through the motions. How do you know that? Well, because they only made it 2 weeks or they only made it 7 days. I think one of the reasons why people only make it 3 days, 7 days is because it's so damn hard. It's so hard, and there's all these factors that the desire to use and the solution of getting high becomes almost irresistible when you start to add all this stuff up. And I'm not in any kind of way trying to make excuses for anybody. Please understand that. The best thing you guys can do as parents and spouses is set boundaries and not accept excuses. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just trying to look at it from what appears to be a logical point of view. This is not an easy mountain to climb. So if somebody gives it a try, I would say like they're giving it a real try. The problem is that maybe they're not setting themselves up with enough support. Maybe they're not going through the motions and doing enough that they need to do. But there's nothing easy about this. Stopping using drugs and alcohol is not just stopping a bad habit. It's not like I was chewing my fingernails and I need to quit. It's an overwhelming brain issue. That's what I'm kind of trying to sell to you guys. Yes, ma'am.
I know, I was never, and I guess you can't really forewarn, but just how you feel, because when you're high for so long and you're numb to everything, and then when that's gone, and it's like everything is brand new. Like,
Yeah.
Pain is really pain times 10 because you're not numb anymore.
In every sense of the word.
And nobody really kind of forewarned me that when something hurts, it's going to really hurt.
So physical pain becomes much more intense. Emotional pain becomes much more intense. Everyday life becomes much more intense. And so all of that.
Cut was like cutting my finger.
Yeah, all of that becomes a major issue. Now, if you add into it this idea of a dual disorder or co-occurring disorders, and I'm going to talk a lot about mood disorders because it seems to be the most common thing that we see a favor, makes it a little bit more complex because you also have a person who, in my case, I wasn't dealing with depression before I got into addiction. I probably was anxious. I probably would have met the criteria for anxiety. Definitely met the criteria for coming out of a traumatic situation. So, I'm anxious, or if you're depressed, you're sort of down here, right? On everyday experience, you're kind of, you're not really feeling it to begin with. And when you use the substances, the payoff is greater. It's called reward potential. So if your reward potential, if your payoff is higher, that also is going to make it more likely that you're going to go back to the substances. So, and then the other thing about this, I've heard a lot of parents talk about this, a lot of spouses talk about this, a lot of people in recovery talk about this. I don't know which came first. I don't know whether my son or daughter was dealing with depression first and then the drinking came, or I don't know whether they were dealing with anxiety first and then the drugs came. That's a really hard thing to figure out. And a lot of folks' initial interaction with help is a psychiatrist, many, many times. So maybe you see a psychiatrist or you see a family doctor. Sometimes that will be handled well, sometimes it won't. Many times it results in what? Medication. So now you start to say, well, what came first, the chicken or the egg? What is my loved one dealing with? So as people learn about this, you got to get even more information beyond the addiction realm. I mean, it can get really, really confusing with what you're dealing with. Now, there used to be a simpler way of dealing with this, and I don't do this anymore. I couldn't in good conscience do this, but there was a day and time when there's a drug and alcohol program, you would tell people, put down the substances and let's see what happens. That was standard practice. That's not really advised now. We don't advise anyone to do that. But we do advise people to, explore this issue and learn about it and get mental health help along with substance use disorder help. But can you see how that also kind of comes into play as you go through this? And about 1/3 of people in treatment have a mental health issue. So 33%. And also, if you look at this it's hard to see, but this is about 30% are abusing 3 or more drugs. So the point of this slide is this is real complicated. It's usually not only is it not just alcohol. It's almost like if it was just alcohol, you'd be like, wow, okay, come on in. We're just going to help you stop drinking. But it's usually like 3 or more substances. So what is it? It's alcohol, prescription drugs, and crack cocaine, and a co-occurring depression. It starts to get very, very complex when you start to mix in all these different issues. And you really have to, I hate to say this, but it's almost like you have to be patient with the process. You have to be patient with the process of recovery. What comments or thoughts or questions do we have on just understanding what's going on in the brain, or anything I can help you figure out? Yes, ma'am.
Our son is addicted to meth. He was diagnosed with bipolar here a few years ago. Meth will mimic bipolarism. And once a doctor got hold of him here and William got cleaned up, he found out he does not have bipolar. And that causes a problem because he's on medications for something that he doesn't have, and then doing the drugs. So
that happens a lot more than you, I mean, there are probably others in this room that can talk about similar experiences. That probably happens a heck of a lot more than we might know. Do you guys get that? So what you got going on is, if a person's on, that's a really good example. If you're on methamphetamine, you look like you have bipolar disorder. Because by definition, methamphetamine, you're up and then you crash. Bipolar, you're literally, you're up, it's called hypomania, and then you crash. It isn't even like, it's not even to judge the doctor that prescribed that or diagnosed that. It's just really, really hard to get some of this stuff figured out. And so then you get put on medication, and now all of a sudden you're on medication, but you're still using, which is going to make everything even more complex and make the roller coaster even more intense. So what suggestions would you guys have for one another, or even information for us in terms of helping figure this out, or dealing with such complex stuff? Anybody have any thoughts on dealing with this stuff?
One thing talked about here before, Rich, is there's a common belief that the doctor can't tell you anything, which is true, but you can still tell the doctor. So if you know your loved one is involved with methamphetamine, you can call the doctor up and tell them that. They can use it any way they want to.
Yes, so even though the HIPAA laws haven't changed yet, you can deliver information to the physician. You can email them, text them, bring a note into the doctor's office and say, I think you should know that Johnny's using methamphetamine. You might want to know that when you're making your assessment of bipolar disorder and he's telling you that I haven't slept for the last 5 days. That's a detail that might make that assessment a little bit different. So yeah, you can deliver information. You can try, if you guys are involved and you're actually paying the bill for the doctor, you can make some stipulations around, whether or not you get to be involved in the conversation. If they want to see a psychiatrist and they're telling you that they don't want you to come in and see the psychiatrist with them, there's a reason for that, guys. It's not because they're worried or concerned about their privacy. They've been spun out there doing all kinds of stuff. They are not necessarily concerned about their reputation. Do you follow me? It's like I'm in active addiction and all of a sudden you want to come, oh, whoa, wait a minute. Yeah, I know I held up the QT last week, but this is crossing the line. You're not coming into my doctor's office. That's an exaggeration. Do you guys get where I'm coming from? If a person is saying, there's two things. There's two unofficial rules I'll tell you. One is, if a person won't take a drug test, it's because it's dirty. All right? The second thing is, if they won't let you in the doctor's office, it's because they're trying to get substances to abuse. Okay? If otherwise, there's no reason not to come into the doctor's office. The conversation between that person and the psychiatrist is not that intense, guys. How many people, by show of hands, have actually been in the doctor's office with a loved one? it's not psychoanalytic theory and therapy that's going on, right? They're not talking about deep, dark issues. There's nothing going on in that room that's actually private. Do you follow me? It's not a therapy session. It's not like you're sitting in on my session with the person where we're talking about past issues and we're talking about maybe embarrassing things that this person did. It's a doctor's appointment. It's a checkup that takes 5 minutes. So I would really, really try to use whatever leverage you have to be part of that process. A physician, a psychiatrist, stands no chance at making an accurate assessment of the situation if they don't have all the information. That example about bipolar is perfect. Yes, sir.
Last night while we were watching the program, we were with a neighbor who lost their son about a year or two ago, 30-some-odd years old. They said they had called his doctor and told him that their son was an active drug user. He told the son that. Now, do you see that as professional?
Wow, I've heard that happen before.
Sounded a little unprofessional.
I probably wouldn't, I don't know what would have compelled him to have to say that. I would think I would just take that information and put it in my data bank and just use it. He may have, maybe he said it because he felt like he had to confront something. So, if we're sitting there and Jen's asking me for this substance and she's being persistent and I'm now trying to say no, maybe I have to say, well, I have some information, your family called. Perhaps it was something like that. It gets very, very tough in a situation like that. So they had called, given the information, and he let them know. Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. I have been in situations where I've been working with a person and I've also kind of like communicated with the family, and I've definitely seen it hurt my relationship with the person. So I don't want to come off like it's a simple thing, but I do want to tell you that if they're not, that if I'm in active addiction and I'm not letting you come into the doctor's office with me, it's not because I've been towing the line. There's something up. There's something up usually going on in a situation like that. Yes, ma'am.
So what do you do in that situation? Like my son, when he got out of rehab, he has a lot of back issues, which I was telling you about last week, that his pain is real. And he had one doctor telling him that the only thing that would work for him is Suboxone.
Yeah.
So then my son had it in his head, okay, which he had taken before, that's what he had to do. That was the one and only drug that was going to cure him.
Yeah.
So he was referred to a Suboxone clinic, and I was completely against him going on that.
Right.
But I was trying to support him and not make him angry, and I said, well, I'll go and learn about it. But
Yeah.
I want to ask questions. I'm not going to say yes or no.
Yeah.
But I need to understand it. And he was adamant, like, no, because he was so afraid I was going to tell the doctor.
Well, I think that's where you would start. So that's where you'd have to try to back off a little bit on your preconceived ideas, and that's the conversation you guys would have to have. Is I'm not going to do that. That's not my intent. That's not why I'm going. But at a certain point, you sort of have to insist on it. If you have any leverage over the person. If you don't have any leverage over the person, you can't do anything about it. What I mean by leverage, guys, financial leverage. Any way that you can exert influence over the person. Usually it's financial leverage, right? Usually if I'm paying for your doctor, then I get to talk to your doctor, that kind of thing. And I would pull that trump card. It's a very important conversation. Even if you're just sitting there listening and everything is going fine and you don't ever say anything, the idea of that psychiatrist only having half the information, or that doctor only having half the information, is problematic in my eyes. It's going to lead to these situations that we talked about earlier, diagnoses that aren't accurate, and then all the problems that go along with that. I don't think, I will go on the record and say, I don't think you need to be overly involved. Now you guys are going to go home and just start firing off emails to doctors. Don't do that. That's not, Rich said, I'm supposed to talk. That's not what I want you to do. I don't mean overly involved, and I don't even mean that you need to give like really intimate information. It's the basic stuff, like he's using methamphetamine, by the way. He's using methamphetamine while you're trying to work through whether or not he has bipolar disorder. He's using methamphetamine. It's basic information. So I would really push hard. I'd also, if he's in rehab, or you feel like you're going to deal with this again, I try to have that conversation before he comes out.
Well, he was out for 2.5 weeks, and
I mean, I thought he was going back. You had shared last week.
yeah, he did. He got out of the hospital
Okay.
Friday, and I drove him immediately. here.
I mean next time.
I think the hardest part that I'm learning now, since he's was in the hospital, and I think for me as a mom, it makes me so angry because he tried to reach out to people. One guy that he asked to be a sponsor and a couple of his friends, he was calling them saying, I need help. I don't
Yeah.
want to do this. I need help, but my dealer is hounding me about all of the hair.
How do you know that?
They called and told me.
Oh wow. Okay.
Once he relapsed.
Okay.
And one of them called crying, and he said, I am so sorry, I feel so bad, because he did try to stop himself.
So yeah, I get that, and that creates a lot of anger inside of you because you're like, what the heck? If somebody would have returned a phone call, maybe he wouldn't have done
I
that.
just get so angry with these dealers that,
Yeah.
people are trying so hard, but the
Yeah.
addiction is so strong, and they're trying to stay strong, but then
Yeah,
here you get
I get
someone
that.
down, and I'm like, oh, here's some heroin.
Yeah.
It just makes me angry.
So
There's no way to stop it.
in this case, he's back in. I would try to have, and I was going to talk about this when I talk about when do you talk to your loved one, where do you talk to your loved one, and how do you talk to your loved one. You want to try to have conversations around boundaries and all these issues when your loved one is sane. Would that make sense? Not in active addiction, not in the middle of not whenever they're in the middle of the episode, not when they're hitting the fan, not when you're on the way to the doctor's office and he's already in that mindset where he's going to try to get something going. You want to have as many of these conversations while they're on the good side of the fence. So before he comes out of rehab, let's just use the rehab example. If you can think of like a pending issue like this, and you can go ahead and have this conversation and say, if I'm going to pay for your Suboxone when you come out, or I'm going to pay for your medication or your follow-up appointment, I'm going along. Now if the doctor says you're not allowed in, I'd change doctors. Like if he gives you permission and the doctor says you're not allowed in, I'd try to change doctors. I know that's not easy either. I know that there's a limited number of doctors, but you guys have got. This is not the way. I wish it wasn't this way. I really wish that I didn't have to say what I'm about to say. But you guys have got to become very aggressive advocates for yourself and for your loved one. The system is not at all set up to walk you through this process. There are no patient navigators to take you by the hand. We're trying to fill some void here at Favor, and we need to do a better job, and we're going to do a better job. But the more you learn, this idea, learn as much as possible, and it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to ask questions, especially if you're paying whatever you're paying for the Suboxone clinic, or whatever you're paying for the psychiatric appointment. It's okay to ask questions. Why are you putting him on that medication? What is that medication? Do you know that he was using? The day and age of here's the psychiatrist, they sit on high, here are your orders, you take these meds and just kind of shut up and go be a good little patient. Those days have got to be over because you're not getting enough time with them, you're not getting enough attention, it's just not going to work in today's world. It's unrealistic. It's almost like you guys have to become mini experts on these issues. You have to become experts on these issues. Now, don't Google all your information. You might get some freaky results if you start Googling all your information. But where can you learn about this? Favor. Yes. Yes, you're right. Faces and Voices of Recovery at 355 Woodruff Road. That's a good place. You got support groups that you can go to. You can go to other type of support groups where you're going to learn about it. Where else can you learn about this issue? Where can you learn as much as possible about this issue?
From other parents?
From other people that have been through it. I mean, I think the idea of talking to somebody who's negotiated the system themselves can be very, very helpful. Getting information from other experts, talking to therapists, trying to find people that you trust along the way, information that you trust along the way. I kind of tongue-in-cheek say about the Google thing, you can Google information. You can get decent information. There are websites out there that are going to give you accurate information. But the more you learn and the more you learn how the system works. Now, to that end, does anybody have any pending question or any issue? It doesn't even have to be anything that we've talked about, but any circumstances they're dealing with right now that they need some concrete information on regarding their loved one. Anything going on? Yes.
Yeah, this is my first time here.
Okay.
Debbie and Phil Burns did hearing aid. They suggested I might come to this meeting and I learned a lot. So my situation is a little different than what I've heard here tonight, but I'm sure not different than other people have experienced. I have a brother that lives in Pittsburgh.
Oh, wow.
And he's recently lost his job. His wife's leaving. He's already out. He has really no support system. He's reached out. He initially thought he was going to go live with a friend in Indiana. That fell through. And I know
The state
why.
of Indiana?
Yeah. I know why, because he's an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And so he's called me up and said, "Can I come stay with you?" I said, "Well, Dave, you know." And he's 57. Really don't even know him that well, even though he's my brother. And
Yeah.
probably since, you know, high school when he left and went his direction. And
He called you to come live with you? Is that?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
so I started asking questions because I needed to understand the situation. He wasn't giving me any information.
Yeah.
And so he just hung up the phone. So I called his wife. I got some information about what's been going on and why she can't have him anymore, and it's all around the alcohol. So now I'm sitting here struggling with what's my next steps.
Yeah.
You know, this is my wife, and we've already discussed, we really don't want him coming in our home.
Yeah.
I have no idea what he's liable to do. I think he's somewhat of a functional alcoholic, because when he did work, he did very well, and he never missed work. He worked for Giant Eagle, they had layoffs.
Yeah.
He got cut. But now he's living in a flea bag hotel, and when his money runs out, I don't know where he's gonna go.
So, whenever you're looking at this situation, you want to start asking yourself, what are the facts? What are the indisputable facts that you know about the situation? And the first thing is that he is not going to come to your house and stay stone cold sober just because he's moving from Sodom and Gomorrah, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to the Bible Belt. It's not going to work that way. So he's going to come to your house and you start getting hammered at your house. So that's the first fact you have to recognize. So when you're in this situation, you know that there's no magic answer of all of a sudden he's going to come down here and live at your house. So you have to take that into consideration. And if you had him come to your house, you literally would have to be saying, I'm ready for my brother, who I barely know, to come down to my house and just drink and be a mess. And the second fact that you know is that it must be pretty darn serious if his wife's already making this move. That kind of thing. So the conversation, I mean, you make your own decisions, just like I was saying, but that really puts the idea of him coming down to your house kind of on the back burner, at least in my opinion. Now, what could be offered is I can get you support in terms of finding rehab. I can get you support. And I probably, on Facebook Live, got some of my homies from Pittsburgh. Are there any? Shout out, however you do that. And I have an organization that I work with in Pittsburgh that I can, after this meeting, give you a phone number that he can call. Carmen, if you're out there, I'm getting you some business. And so he can call. It's a recovery community organization in Pittsburgh, similar to what we have. And you could give him this information, and you wouldn't feel like he didn't have an option. Does that make sense? Like you don't have to say like, no, I can't help you, leave me alone. You can say, look, you can't come live at my house, but here's a contact, and I can get you hooked up, and these folks will help.
I know he's gone through rehab before. I have no idea
Yep.
what kind of support system he had when he came out. Thinking not much.
Yeah.
And so he's going to have no support system really up there. And certainly go down that path, but my other thought is not bring him to my house, but find a support system down
You
here
could-
where.
You mean find like a program here?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an option. That's an option if you want to think about that. There are programs here that he could go to. There are several that now when you're dealing with this, and you guys can kind of put this in your situation, what you might be dealing with, he's going to need to get detoxed. He's coming off of alcohol, so he can't just go from drinking to not drinking at all. So he's going to need to get detoxed. So you'd have to start with that, and then there are plenty of residential programs that he could get into down here. But you probably you might even want to start with a local detox. And again, we can get you that information. Does that make sense to everyone in the room? When you're coming off of alcohol and benzodiazepines, you can't just quit. He may even want to quit. He may even be saying like, okay, I'll come to the program, but he would need to go to a local program. Where exactly does he live?
Oakdale?
Oakdale? Okay. Oakdale? Oakmont? What is it?
It's Oakdale.
It's Oakdale? Okay. All right. Yep.
So he's got no insurance, he's got no money.
Yeah, so he would go, yeah, and they can find, there are, in every city, in every state, there are what are called publicly funded programs. Now, will there be a waiting list? Absolutely. There will always be a waiting list for those programs. But he can get into a program without insurance. They're gonna, when he gets there, they're gonna say like, you're gonna have to pay and we're gonna send you a bill, but it's kind of like going to the emergency room. They can't turn him away. They would detox him, and then if he wanted to come here, we could certainly, I mean, that part would actually be the easier part in terms of getting into. They have residential programs in all parts of South Carolina. They have residential programs in North Carolina if you wanted to wind up there. But I feel like where you want to get clarity on these situations, guys, I mean, what's the bottom line? The bottom line is you can't come live with me. And a lot of people in this room are, you're in that situation. You're in that situation where if you got a phone call tomorrow from your loved one, you have to have clarity in your mind on what you're going to say. And we always encourage you to put yourself at the top of that list. How is this going to affect me? You can't go down with the ship just to make things a little bit better for him. And again, there's no reason to believe that just a geographic relocation from Pittsburgh to South Carolina is automatically going to make the drinking go away. That kind of thing. Great questions, though. Great questions. Anyone else have any burning situation? Yes, ma'am.
A burning question.
Yes.
If you know of a dealer, because obviously we've heard someone just recently say they died, and whether how they died, obviously was drugs. My son has vehemently, how do you say that word?
Vehemently.
Thank you, good say. Said, Mom, you put your life in danger, and I just so want to turn them in, and I want to know your thoughts on that.
Oh, wow. So the question is, do you turn in your loved one's dealer?
Exactly.
So first of all, how do you do that? Just call the police and leave an anonymous tip?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I can answer that, but what do you want to do? Well, my ex-daughter-in-law.
She's talking about for revenge purposes.
No, I'm talking
No,
about
but
for anybody else is gonna get deals.
Oh, okay. All right.
He was DEA. I literally went to each of the addresses, gave him them, GPS'd them, took them, and showed him pictures, and did this. I've even gone to the dealers, and I don't do this anymore.
No, okay, I want to tell you right now. Hold up.
We know that.
I got to say this before Darlene continues. This is not a favor-sanctioned activity. Do not go to the dealer's house. That is not at all.
Is that not aired on the side of mercy?
That is not an approved activity.
But the point is, it doesn't do any good, because
Yeah.
they have so much of that they already probably, if they're really, if they're a big dealer.
They know it.
They already know it, and my son's biggest dealer, and this is like 10 years, is still active.
Yeah.
Exactly where he's been, and they have not shut him down.
Yeah.
Can you do something about that?
I would kind of agree with what you're saying, Darlene, and I think this is probably a much more common issue that people deal with than we might think. Whenever you're going through this, there's probably a party that says, I want to stop this. I want to get to the person. I want to shut off the dealer. I want to, there's a bumper sticker that was literally going around, and this was going a little too far. It was a kill your local heroin dealer or something like that, and you can't. That's something we would encourage you to just stay out of, guys. Honestly, here's how we think about it. You have an emotional reserve to deal with any problems that you're dealing with in life, and when addiction enters the picture, conflictual situations take away from your emotional reserve. Trying to figure out how to get a dealer to go to jail And frustrating the heck out of yourself around that situation is just going to drain you. And you need your energy to deal with all the different stuff that you're dealing with directly related to this addiction. You know, I don't think, I'll be honest with you, I think we have a great law enforcement team in Greenville, South Carolina. I've been absolutely amazed. I would put the Greenville City Police and the Sheriff's Department at the top of the list of anybody I've dealt with in regards to this issue. They have been extremely cooperative and opening their doors to me, and they have me at their roll call talking about this issue, and they are not approaching this as, they're approaching it as a brain disease. I'm telling you, we got good officers, and but we're not going to be able to wrest our way out of this either. You're never going to shut down the trafficking from Mexico that this problem is going to go away. We do not solve this as a community, and your loved one doesn't solve this until he solves it individually. In other words, he needs to stop wanting it, because there's always another dealer that's going to show up. There's always another, I'll tell you this, there's always another drug that's going to show up. Do you know that even 10 years ago, we weren't even considering the fact that we would be dealing with fentanyl and carfentanil? I don't know if people know that. Like, I've been in this business for 17 years. There wasn't an issue of how do we handle carfentanil and fentanyl. Now, here in South Carolina, it's only been within the last 3 or 4 years that we've been dealing with it. In the North, it's been about a decade. But do you follow me? It wasn't even, literally, this is a Frankenstein drug. It's not even heroin anymore. So even new drugs will show up to meet the demand. What has to to be the supply, what has to change is the demand. We have to get to people, we have to help people not want to do it. You can't get rid of all the drug dealers. So, yes, sir.
Dumb question, but maybe you can answer it. I think everybody here is relatively intelligent, and we're thinking logically. We don't understand how the addict thinks illogically. It doesn't. We just can't comprehend it. But why would drug dealers push something that will literally, like carfentanil, one use can kill you? Why are they killing? Why are they killing their customers?
Why are they killing their customers? So that's a great question. So here's how it is. It's such a small. You can take heroin, and you can cut it with such a small amount of carfentanil, and you can just basically like dilute this batch of heroin into so much more sellable product that the profit goes up so high that the dealers don't want to kill anyone. They call it the unfortunate cost of doing business. So it's kind of like, this is going to happen. We wish it wouldn't happen, but really what it comes down to is you can take one bag of heroin and turn it into 100 bags of heroin because this stuff is so potent, and therefore, it's a profit motive. Yes.
Do the users want this stuff that's been cut with the fentanyl?
No,
Is it better buy?
that's not what's going on. You're hearing some.
I've heard they seek it out.
Well, no, that's brand new stuff, and that's not really what's happening. That's not where all these deaths are coming from. There are people who will use just fentanyl. There are people, but that's a relatively small percentage. People aren't seeking out. They're seeking out the most powerful stuff. And when they're going and getting a hold of this stuff, they're not, again, you got to remember, that's when all the decision making goes away. This may be the best way to think about it from the user's point of view. If I'm going to go out, if I'm craving this stuff, and I'm in that zone that I was talking about earlier where I'm in that cycle, and I'm sitting here right now and I decide I'm going to go get it, the part of my brain that goes, it could be dangerous, it could be laced, it could be cut, it goes away, guys. Like, the decision-making part of my brain literally goes away. You know, we've showed the pictures of the brain. We showed the midbrain and the frontal cortex, and the frontal cortex is where you make all your decisions, right? That goes away when you're in the middle of that thinking. So nobody is actually, I don't believe anybody's actually even sitting down and saying, I could die. I think you are on automatic pilot, and you get it. And people have said we should make something that would test it. This is what people have said. Here's the answer. Let's make something that could be added to the substance that would show up as fentanyl. I think people would still use it. And I think the reason why people would still use it is if you're at that point where you just went and got it, you are so far down that road that the idea that somehow that thinking part of your brain is going to take over. No, you know what you're going to do? That's not going to happen to me. Do you guys follow that? Like that's yes, Wayne.
Yeah, there was, this past weekend I had to do a hospital visit, and there was a kid 18 years old, and he thought he was taking prescription Roxy.
Oh, wow.
He takes the one pill, and they thought it was calling him in the DOA on arrival, so they had to hit him with his Narcan like several times.
Holy
He
cow.
finally snaps out of it, but he had no idea what was in that pill.
So that's an interesting phenomenon there too. That the pill phenomenon, the pills being pressed and being made, that's even, I don't want to say more diabolical, but that's very diabolical too, because that's a situation where here, take this, that's not even like heroin that's cut. That may be straight fentanyl. I don't know what's
They say
being.
to get high on the street now is like Russian roulette.
Yeah. But why do people continue to get high? And you got to remember, like, we know that this has been going on for a really long time. It might be kind of new to us here in South Carolina over the last 3 or 4 years, but these northern states have dealt with it for 10 to 15 years, and it hasn't slowed down at all. So the fear of death is not going to stop people. I mean, it is the prime example of addiction, guys. This is the prime example of addiction. The fear of dying is not going to stop anybody. So, and that's really hard to understand. That's very, very hard to understand from a logical point of view. What you have to do is you have to try to step back and say there's nothing logical about this. This is not about rational decision making. This is not about anything that approximates like a risk analysis or anything like that. This is, I'm in that state, I'm in that cycle, and boom, I'm going to go. And well, what other comments or thoughts along that line? Any other questions about any of this stuff? Fentanyl, carfentanil. Any questions about any pressing issues that anyone needs to cover before and then I'll finish up with our slides. But yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm new. My son just came back home after being in the Army and addicted to opiates and alcohol, and I'm just taking it day by day, trying to, he's comfortable. We welcomed him home, and now, okay, do I give him some timeline? Okay, a month from now, you need to have a plan in place for, the moving out, or do I, try to get him? I mean, he's not admitting what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's ready to go into some facility. So
Yeah.
I'm just kind of day to day with it right now.
Did he admit any kind of an issue? Is it generally known that it was going on in the
Yeah.
Army? Okay. So it's there. It's an issue that's there.
Yes.
Talking about this stuff can take on there's several different ways to go about it. The way that I would go about it is I would try to sit down and just have a conversation with him. I'd let him know you were here, and I would say this to anybody. The reason why you let people know that you're here is that you're not trying to be the expert. You're trying to gain information. In other words, I don't know everything about this, so I'm learning about it. And I would immediately try to get him to engage in some type of conversation with one of us, or come to a group. You could tell him, to just come check out one of our meetings. You don't have to approach it as, an intervention. If you don't do this, you have to leave. But I would see where he's at with getting help. One of the things that I never assume is exactly where a person's at in terms of wanting to get help. None of us look like we wanted to get help. I'll be honest with you. And we were talking about this whenever I was doing this podcast with my wife, and we were talking about, my experience coming into recovery and stuff like that. And she said it didn't look like I wanted to get help at all. Do you follow me? Like there was nothing about her that thought at all that I wanted to get help. So we don't assume. Who knows? He may be in a terrible state of mind, and he may come here and hear what he's dealing with. So I would try to put some pressure on him to get to some meetings, and then kind of let us start to talk to him and see what he actually has going on, and maybe we can get some more information and help figure it out. Now, if other red flags start to go on, if this starts to escalate, and you start to see other things, and you just, once you're around him, you say to yourself, whoa, there's more to this than we thought, then you would want to come back, or you want to call us, and we want to schedule something like an intervention. Interventions, guys, are pretty intense, right? Like that's a situation where if you're going to do an intervention, you have to be prepared to have some really difficult conversations. Most of the time, we have found most of the time we're able to work a person into a program, But sometimes it's just DEFCON 5 because of the danger level of what's going on. And what do I mean by that? They start using other stuff. He starts going out to the street and buying heroin. That's a huge issue, right? That's a huge red flag. Even if the drinking escalates to the point of where it's dangerous, there's no perfect example I can give you for that, or magic number of drinks when it crosses that line, but you'll know it. But we always want to start a person in the recovery program, even if it's not the ideal recovery program. And what I mean by that is maybe he should be in rehab, but he can start doing something while he's in Greenville. The last thing he needs to do is just chill at your house. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Time on your hands isn't necessarily the best thing whenever you're trying to deal with this. Yes?
I know that the Phoenix Center has the detox, and you call it 8 a.m. or something. Is that, they also have a longer program there, or where is the longer program that would be
So-
without insurance?
So it's not the Phoenix Center. It's called Morris Village.
Oh, okay.
We can help get a person into Morris Village.
Okay.
And there are other recovery houses. Now, if an option for people, and this is a great question. So the Phoenix Center does detox. You call 8 o'clock in the morning, hey, we have a bed, come on in. Now you're going to be there for 5 to 7 days, whatever it is. You can leave there and go to a recovery house,
Right.
and that's another option. The downside with the recovery house is it's less restrictive, and sometimes, the person may not quite be ready for that. So, they have to be ready to do recovery if they're in a recovery house. And in a recovery house, guys, the doors aren't locked. You can get in, you can get out, that kind of thing. Do you think he could handle that?
No, he needs to be.
He needs to be in a more Yeah, do you guys understand the difference between the two things?
Yes.
When you're saying to yourself, what can the person handle? A rehab setting is kind of like nothing gets in, nothing gets out. I can pretty much guarantee I'm going to keep all of you clean if we're in rehab. If it's a halfway house, that's a different story, because I'm encouraging you to go get a job. I'm encouraging you to go to meetings. I want you to go meet people.
Is the Morris place the halfway house? Or
No,
okay.
it's a rehab.
That's a rehab, okay.
That's filling out an application. It's a very similar experience. You fill out an application, and then you're on a little bit of a waiting list.
Right.
So, and the Phoenix Center knows all about that. If he gets in there and he is willing to do that, they will get him on a list. Yes, Mike.
That's what I was gonna say, detox, they do have counselors.
Yeah,
One time as a parent, I was told, because they would call and say, well, I don't have nowhere else to go.
yeah.
But the counselor there,
Yep.
part of their job is
They do.
the entry plan.
They have a case manager and a counselor, and if the person, you do have to fill out an application, you have to send it in, but quite frankly, I've never seen anybody get turned down. I shouldn't say that, not now that I said it could happen, but the thing is there's a waiting list.
Right.
There's a waiting list, and that can sometimes be the downfall to a certain degree, because a person's going to leave detox when the time comes, right?
Right.
So now those days are up, and you'll literally get a call and be like, hey, Mom, can you come get me? Oh, well, I can't get into Morris Village for a week. Now what the heck do you do for a week? I will tell you that wherever you're at in this process, if your loved one is dealing with like waiting for a bed, or where I'm going to go, get them to a meeting here. Get them to a meeting anywhere for that matter. People, they've done studies on this. People get better just by virtue of being on a waiting list. Does that make sense? Like, it's almost like if they think that they're going to be doing something, they start to take action while they're getting ready to do something. So get them to a meeting. If you have this conversation and you say to yourself, this guy needs rehab, well, he won't go, or we can't get it figured out right now. Let's get in the car. Every day at noon, we have a meeting here. We have a bunch of meeting lists in the resource room over here that has all the local 12-step meetings. We started a different kind of meeting if a person wants to try something that has a little bit more of a group therapy feel and a little bit more of it's pretty lesson oriented and pretty homework oriented. It's called Smart Recovery. That's every Tuesday and Thursday evening at 6:30. We have our all recovery meetings every day at noon, and also at 6:30 on Tuesday and 6:30 on Friday. And then, of course, there are countless 12-step meetings. There's something that people can do for recovery every day. All day, every day, quite frankly. And if you're waiting for rehab, instead of just waiting, do one of those things. Jump on one of those things. What other questions? What other questions on a real practical note, guys? Yes?
When he gets out, when my son gets out, the first time he was in, like I said, he's only been out 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
Like he's going straight somewhere. My question I'm kind of dealing with now is I've been really researching different places because I don't want him so far away that I can't ever see him.
Yeah.
But I don't want him so close to home, he's gonna be calling people saying, hey, come pick me up.
Yeah.
I'm down here. I don't want him that close to home that he's that comfortable to leave.
Right.
You know? So is it better to send him further away or be closer to home?
I've seen both. I have seen both programs work like that. I've seen both those situations work. You know, I get nervous with certain areas of the country. They don't have necessarily the best reputation in terms of what goes on once they get a hold of somebody. Some of those southern Florida programs can kind of like sink their teeth into people, and but some of them are good. You have to really do your homework, and the facility wherever they're recommending, they need to be held accountable for wherever they recommend.
See, that's where I'm torn, like, should I have him go somewhere since he's in Florida now in rehab?
Yeah.
But I've been looking like in Asheville, even.
Asheville has a bunch. Greenville has some, but he's from Greenville, so that makes it a little bit difficult. Georgia has some. You can find recovery houses everywhere. Charlotte has a good
Some in
program.
Arizona, I've heard the.
Yeah, they're all over. Yeah, they're all over the. You can find, yes.
There is an organization, I think it's NARRA or something like that, rates the level.
So there's there is. It's called National Association of Recovery
May
Residences.
not be.
There's a website you can go to, ma'am, that's called National Association of Recovery Residences. National Association of Recovery Residences. You can click on the state, and it'll take you to. These are recovery houses that have actually been observed and accredited and looked at. That doesn't mean that they're all good. That means at least somebody's looked over their shoulder a little bit.
What was that again? I'm sorry.
National Association of Recovery Residences. I would try to put the treatment center on the hook for it. And I would say things like, I hold you accountable for what program you recommend for my kid. Why are you recommending that program? That kind of thing. How do we know what happens if something goes wrong? How do I find out about it? What are the procedures? Will you communicate with me if my son gets kicked out? Will you communicate with me if my son uses and has to leave because of a relapse? I would ask all kinds of questions. And I would not take their word for anything. I don't think the treatment industry has earned trust. That's not to say that certain treatment centers haven't earned trust, but the industry as a whole has not earned trust. They think that it should just be given blindly because, well, they're a treatment center, right? And we're accredited and we've been licensed. Well, let me tell you, it doesn't take much to get accredited and licensed. All right? So I would be very, and when I say that, guys, I sound frustrated with it because I am frustrated with it. I will be very open and transparent about this. I have sent people places and I have not been happy with the results. I have sent people places and I have heard absolutely outrageous things. And I've heard it more than I've heard good things. That's just me being straight with you guys. And I wish I had a better conclusion other than you have got to be an aggressive advocate for your loved one. You got to, and I think, and it sounds like that program that your son was at would be okay with those type of questions, given how they responded whenever he slipped up.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, even before he relapsed, from the time he got out, they've called him every day. They've called me every day, checking on me.
Yeah. So you want to. That's the type of program you want. You want a type of program that when you call, they call you back, right? You want the type of program that whenever you call and you have questions, they sound like they're willing to answer the questions, not like you're an inconvenience.
And the good thing, like this place is, like even when he was there the first time before he got out, like even his therapist, he was having a really bad day one day and was wanting to leave, and he was really depressed and crying, and they called me just to tell me he was having a really bad day.
Yeah, they sound like a good program. I mean, look, there are programs out there that are 100% complete joke. I mean, I'm talking like disgustingly inadequate and literally just popping up to try to tap everything that they can out of the $40 billion drug and alcohol treatment industry. And so, if you want to vet a program with us, we have a list of programs, resources that we've used where we've had decent results with, that kind of thing. If you ever want to ask personally at meetings like this, if you ask me about a program I've heard of, and if I've heard bad things, I'll tell you I heard bad things. That kind of thing. Yes, sir.
What about checking references?
You can check references. Sometimes you can check references right on. They'll have reviews and things like that. You still have to be careful with that because one of the practices in treatment is they pay people to write reviews for them. So that's a relatively common thing. I would be very careful with any program that when you got on the phone with them, they started to say things to you like, "Hey, you got to get your loved one to treatment today or he's going to die." Actually, the conversation would go like this: "Can you tell me what kind of insurance you have?" Then they would see what kind of insurance you have and they would run your insurance, and then they would say, "Oh, you need to get him into treatment today." Now, if you don't have the right type of insurance, they're going to say, "Hey, well, here's SAMHSA, the federal government's directory. Call them, they'll find a place for you." If they start pushing too hard, guys, it's not because they care. It's because you have the right insurance. And that's a stone cold fact. And the honest folks in treatment will even admit it. There are certain people out there that have at least the honesty to say, "Yeah, my job is to get people into treatment. That's what I'm doing." The ones that are really, really dangerous are the ones that are telling you that, "Hey, man, I'm just here to help. I'm just here to help." That's not really what's going on. Now here in South Carolina, we would encourage you to use the center and ask questions. If you have certain places, like you talked about that, I can tell you that like everything you said, it passes the smell test, so to speak, even though I haven't personally used them. I would ask questions. I would ask us, have we ever used these programs? And we will straight tell you if we've heard bad things about them, that kind of thing. And but look hard and look close when you go through it. All right, so we're gonna we got to work toward wrapping it up. I got to say a couple things real quick. So we started this on-call line. We have a 24-hour on-call line. We're expanding the on-call line. It's not just related to opioids and heroin anymore. It's you got something going on, you're worried about your loved one, and you want to sign them up for services, and you want us to call. You call this on-call line, give us their number, we will start contacting them. Okay, we're expanding that. What do you want to call that? We are widening our target market. Does that sound good? We're widening our target market. And I have the cards. If anybody needs a card, or actually I'll grab some and make sure we give them to you out there. Next Monday, Carol Kane, I will be in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on vacation. Okay, so Carol will be taking care of this meeting next week. It will be a regular kind of meeting with an open share, so please come back next week. And I don't have any other announcements. Anyone else have any other announcements? Yes, sir. Here we go.
We were on vacation last week. Our daughter's in recovery, and she said, "Dad, I found this." We were at the Cool as a Moose shop in Portland, Maine, and I said, "Dad, I found this for Rich." It says, "Say no to pot," and it's a lobster.
All right. Look at that. That is sweet. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yep. Say no to pot. No such thing as medical pot. That's right. Very cool. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, so we'll wrap it up for tonight, guys. Thank you for being here. I'll be back here 2 weeks from today, and Carol will run the meeting next week. Let's all be thinking about what else we can do and how else we can do this, and in any other kind of groups that we need to do, or any other kind of meetings that we need to do. What you want to think of is, what are the topics, what are the issues, what are the concerns, and how can we use my time most efficiently to get with you guys and give you the information. And again, we've done things like Saturday workshops. I want to let you know how open I am to that. I wish that, I'm glad the program has grown, and I'm glad our opportunities have grown. I really am. I mean, we have great opportunities. For example, what's going on with the healthcare system is phenomenal, and in a lot of ways groundbreaking, and not really being done anywhere else. But it takes me away from from you guys. It takes me away from the opportunity to talk to families and talk to people. But we can get this done if we do it in different ways. So if there's other topics or there are other issues or other things that we need to talk about, we will do that. But you guys are going to have to tell me what it is that you're looking for. Rich, we need to talk more about interventions, or we need to talk more about co-occurring disorders, or we need to talk more about finding psychiatrists. Whatever it is, we'll do special topics on that, and we'll kind of take it from there. Any other announcements? All right, if that's all, then if we get a moment of silence for those still suffering with this disease and for the family members brought into this no choice of their own, followed by the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right, that's a wrap. Thank you very much. Let's be careful out there.